Nashville, Tennessee. It's a city that trades in the currency of authenticity, yet is built on the most carefully constructed of myths. It is a town of two faces. The one it shows the world on the Grand Ole Opry stage, all glittering rhinestones. Heartfelt lyrics about God and country, and tales of humble beginnings, and the one that thrives in the shadows of Music Row. In dimly lit bars where careers are made and broken over a glass of whiskey. And secrets are guarded with the ferocity of a sacred vow. In this universe, loyalty isn't just a virtue, it's a survival mechanism. For decades, Nashville has perfected this delicate dance between holiness and heartbreak, presenting itself as a church on Sunday and a circus by sundown. But even for a city accustomed to drama, the storm that was brewing in early 2023 was poised to shatter its very foundations, exposing the rot beneath the gilded facade. At the epicenter of this impending earthquake stood two figures who represented the beginning and the zenith of the same Nashville dream. On one side was Keith Urban, a name that had transcended country music to become a global brand. He was more than a superstar, he was an institution. His talent was undeniable, his catalog of hits legendary. But his most valuable asset was his image, that of a devoted husband to Hollywood's untouchable queen. Nicole Kidman, a recovering addict who had found redemption, and a wise elder statesman of the industry. He was Nashville's prodigal son and its reigning king, a man whose reputation seemed as polished and unbreakable as the platinum records that lined his walls. On the other side was Maggie Baugh, a firecracker from Florida with a voice that could both soothe a heartache and start a revolution. She was the quintessential rising star, brimming with the raw talent and earnest sincerity that Nashville claimed to cherish. Hailed by critics as the next big thing, she had just inked a deal with a major label, an affiliate of the same conglomerate that had guided much of Urban's career. She was the future, and he was the establishment. When Urban, in a move celebrated by the industry as a magnanimous act of giving back, took a personal interest in mentoring her, the narrative seemed pre-written. It was a wholesome, symbiotic arrangement on paper, but in the whisper networks of Nashville, it was seen for what it was, a dangerous collision of power, ambition, and proximity. Their connection, like most things in the music business, began under the sterile, fluorescent lights of a recording studio. The official story was one of creative synergy. Keith saw a younger version of himself in her. One producer would later tell a fawning magazine, spinning a tale of artistic kinship. He was guiding her, helping her find her voice. But those present during those late-night sessions recall something different. They remember an atmosphere thick with an unspoken energy, a charge that went beyond mere mentorship. They saw quiet instruments and whispered conversations that lasted long after the sound engineers had gone home. They saw a line being blurred, not between teacher and student, but between a powerful, married man and a young woman whose career was, in many ways, in his hands. This simmering tension exploded into public view, albeit subtly, at the CMA Awards. Their duet was, by all accounts, a showstopper. The performance was electric, the harmonies seamless. Fans and critics alike praised their undeniable chemistry, labeling it the highlight of the night. But in the aftermath of the scandal, that very performance would be replayed and dissected with forensic intensity. Online sleuths would create slow-motion GIFs, pointing to the way their eyes lingered a second too long, the almost imperceptible brush of his hand against hers, a shared glance that felt far too intimate for a scripted stage act. Most damningly, they would point to Nicole Kidman, seated in the front row. Her applause seemed a beat behind the rhythm of the crowd, her smile a masterclass in strained composure. As the final notes faded and the applause thundered, viewers noted her small, telling retreat, a slight turn away from the stage as her husband and his protégé basked in the adulation. It was a fleeting moment, but it was the first visible crack in the flawless edifice of their marriage. For years, Keith and Nicole had been the exception to the Hollywood rule. They were the serene, elegant couple who floated above the messy tabloid chaos that consumed so many of their peers. Their love story was a cornerstone of their respective brands. But behind the closed doors of their Nashville estate, a quiet chill had begun to set in. Those in their inner circle had noticed the change. The easy affection was replaced by a polite distance. Public appearances became more choreographed, their smiles less radiant, their bodies angled slightly away from each other. The whispers started, as they always do, as jokes over expensive bourbon at industry parties. Something's off with those two. By the time the gossip blogs began sniffing around, the quiet suspicion had curdled into a palpable tension that hung over Music City like a humid summer haze. Simultaneously, Maggie Baugh was undergoing a transformation of her own. The once effervescent newcomer, a fixture at every industry event, began to recede from the public eye. Her red carpet appearances became less frequent. Her radiant smile replaced by a guarded, almost haunted expression. Her social media, once a cheerful scrapbook of songwriting sessions and backstage antics, grew darker and more cryptic. Then came the late-night Instagram Live, a moment that would later be seen as a desperate cry for help. Visibly emotional, tears streaming down her face, she spoke to her followers, her voice thick with pain. "I'm just so done," she whispered. "I'm done protecting people who lied to me." No names were mentioned, but the implication was heavy. It was the raw anguish of someone caught in a web of power and deceit. Someone who had reached her breaking point. To the outside world, these were just disparate threads of gossip. To those on the inside, however, the pattern was unmistakable. This wasn't just mentorship and admiration, it was the ticking of a time bomb. Label executives spoke in hushed tones about a promising promotional campaign being mysteriously derailed by personal issues. Keith's publicist began tightly controlling his press appearances, while Nicole's team preemptively shut down any questions about her marriage. The machinery of celebrity damage control was whirring to life, trying to contain a story that was threatening to tear a hole in the fabric of Nashville itself. But it was too late. The fragments were already out there: the late studio nights, the lingering gazes, Maggie's emotional breakdown. They were the outline of a story that everyone knew but no one dared to say aloud. And then, on a quiet weeknight as the city slept, the bomb detonated. Frantic messages began circulating among Maggie's closest friends and confidants. She was about to do something, they said, something irreversible. She was going to break the code of silence that protected the industry's giants. Regardless of the consequences, she was going to tell the truth. As dawn broke over Nashville, the headlines were already being written, preparing to unleash a question that, just 24 hours earlier, would have been unthinkable. What if Music City's most respected man, the symbol of its integrity, was not the man he appeared to be at all? The stage was set, the microphones were live, and the cost of the truth, a price that was still unimaginable, was about to be paid in full. The morning Maggie Baugh finally broke her silence. Nashville's carefully constructed calm didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces. The detonation began not with a bang, but with a cryptic whisper that quickly became a digital wildfire. It started with a simple, chilling caption she posted alongside a picture of a stormy sky: "You can't hide forever." For a few hours, it was mere speculation, fodder for fan forums and gossip blogs. But by mid-morning, the whisper had become a roar. Through a statement released to a single, high-profile music journalist, Maggie Baugh, the quiet newcomer who had always played by the industry's rules, did the unthinkable. She alleged that the father of her unborn child was none other than the untouchable Keith Urban. The claim was so audacious, so destructive, that it induced a collective state of shock. It was a direct missile aimed at the heart of the country music establishment, targeting not just a man, but the very ideal of class and credibility that Nashville sold to the world. The initial reaction from the public was a fierce, almost reflexive denial. This had to be a publicity stunt, a desperate, cynical ploy by a fledgling artist to attach her name to a legend and fast-track her career. Online, the accusations were merciless. She was a gold digger, a homewrecker, a manipulative upstart willing to destroy a family for 15 minutes of fame. It was a classic, textbook response, the first line of defense the public always deploys to protect its idols and discredit the women who dare to challenge them. But as the initial shock subsided, the pieces began to click into place with terrifying speed. The story started to feel less like a fabrication and more like a secret that had been hiding in plain sight. Industry insiders, now emboldened by the public accusation, began leaking corroborating details to reporters. Speaking on the condition of anonymity, they spoke of the studio sessions that ran long into the night, of a tense atmosphere on the set of their last music video, of Urban's team suddenly canceling joint promotional events. Then came the photographic evidence. A fan-shot photo surfaced of Maggie at a coffee shop wearing a distinctive, oversized tour hoodie, the exact same one Keith had been photographed wearing just days earlier. It was a small detail, but in the court of public opinion, it was damning circumstantial evidence. The timing of the revelation was nothing short of merciless. It broke less than 48 hours after Keith and Nicole had walked the red carpet at a major charity gala, performing their roles as the perfect couple. The photos from that night were now re-examined with a new, critical eye. Her hand in his seemed less like a gesture of affection and more like a desperate grip. Her gaze, which had seemed serene, now looked vacant. Online commenters, playing amateur body language experts, described her expression as one of frozen composure. By the next morning, as Maggie's name trended worldwide, that composure would be shattered forever. Back in Nashville, the machine went into overdrive. Emergency meetings were convened at both record labels. Reporters set up camp outside the studio gates, their satellite trucks forming a perimeter. The PR departments of two music empires and one of Hollywood's most powerful talent agencies were now locked in a frantic three-way crisis call. And through it all, Maggie herself remained silent, retreating from the digital world. Her team issued a single, masterfully ambiguous statement that fanned the flames. Maggie is focusing on her health and her truth. It was a sentence pregnant with meaning, positioning her not as an accuser, but as a victim seeking solace. The story now possessed all the ingredients of a cultural earthquake: fame, power, betrayal, and the explosive collision of a carefully guarded image with a devastatingly human reality. The city built on God and guitars had just given birth to a modern tragedy. And the world was watching, transfixed. The modern celebrity scandal has a new, terrifying arbiter of truth, and it isn't a courtroom or a confessional. It's the dark, anonymous corners of the internet. The Keith Urban scandal pivoted from a messy public dispute into an undeniable catastrophe on a Reddit forum. A digital back alley titled, "Country Music Secrets They Don't Want You to Know." There, buried in a thread of industry gossip, a user with no post history uploaded a single, grainy PDF file. The document was stark, clinical, and utterly devastating. It bore two sets of initials, Q and MB, and beneath them, a line of text that would act as a digital guillotine for a superstar's career. Probability of paternity, 99.3%. For a brief moment, there was an eerie digital silence, as if the internet itself was holding its breath. Then came the explosion. The screenshot of the PDF was a weapon of mass destruction. And it went viral with unprecedented speed. It flooded Twitter, then Instagram, then TikTok, where users set the damning image to Urban's own love songs in a display of brutal irony. By noon, it was the only story that mattered. The document's authenticity became the subject of ferocious debate. Digital forensics influencers dissected the pixelation of the lab's letterhead. Conspiracy channels analyzed the font and watermark, searching for signs of forgery. But the document's crude, low-resolution appearance paradoxically worked in its favor. It didn't look like a slick, manufactured PR stunt. It looked like a forbidden secret, illicitly copied and leaked from a secure server. It felt real. Keith Urban's PR team, a formidable force that had navigated him through career-threatening addiction, was rendered impotent. Their only response was a clipped, "No comment." An answer that in the digital age is universally interpreted as an admission of guilt. Maggie's team, in a stroke of strategic genius, said nothing at all. They didn't have to. Their silence, in the face of such a specific and damning piece of evidence, was a tacit confirmation. It was the checkmate move in a game of public perception. Meanwhile, the scandal's collateral damage was becoming painfully visible. In Los Angeles, paparazzi captured Nicole Kidman leaving a yoga studio, dressed in black, her face pale and drawn behind oversized sunglasses. She looked fragile, haunted, but the detail that dominated every tabloid headline was the stark, undeniable absence of her wedding ring. The images were a silent, screaming confirmation of the heartbreak. Social media had devolved into a gladiatorial arena. The public was no longer a passive audience but an active participant in the drama. One camp furiously defended Keith, attempting to poke holes in the evidence, while another hailed Maggie as a brave truth-teller. Memes proliferated, twisting Urban's song titles and public statements into cruel jokes. His recent Instagram caption, "Peace over noise," became the punchline of the day. Noise over peace. The digital mob had convened, and it was acting as judge, jury, and executioner, all at once. Within 48 hours, the story had metastasized. It was no longer about a country music affair. It had become a cultural referendum on the hypocrisy of fame, the dynamics of power, and the illusion of celebrity perfection. For the Nashville insiders who believed in handling scandals quietly, behind closed doors, this was an existential crisis. "This doesn't happen here," one anonymous record executive lamented to Rolling Stone. "This was supposed to stay buried. But the New World Order doesn't bury secrets. It broadcasts them, pixel by agonizing pixel, for the entire world to see." In the opulent, sun-drenched hills of Beverly Hills, the carefully curated fairy tale of Hollywood's most stable couple began to publicly disintegrate. Nicole Kidman, an actress renowned for her porcelain poise and emotional restraint, had always seemed to exist on a plane above the vulgarity of celebrity scandal. She was the embodiment of grace under pressure. But this was not a movie role. This was a raw, personal betrayal being dissected in real time by millions. And for the first time, the cracks in her composure were beginning to show. The paparazzi photos were relentless, capturing her in unguarded moments, clutching a coffee cup like a lifeline. Her gaze fixed on some distant point, her face a mask of dazed disbelief. Her response, when it came, was not a press release or a televised interview. It was a single, devastatingly elegant post on Instagram. She uploaded a stark, black and white art photograph of a glass heart, shattered into countless pieces. There was no caption. None was needed. The image was a silent scream, a minimalist masterpiece of public heartbreak. It was an act of profound communication, and it instantly galvanized public support around her. The comment section became a global sanctuary, flooded with millions of messages of solidarity. "We love you. Nicole, you are a queen who deserves better." Her silence was more powerful than any statement Keith could ever make. It was the quiet, dignified roar of a woman betrayed. Keith Urban, in stark contrast, chose to fight the firestorm with a staggering display of tonal deafness. From a place of seeming sanctuary, a dimly lit, aesthetically pleasing recording studio, he uploaded a photo of himself strumming a guitar. The image was meant to project artistic focus and a serene detachment from the chaos. The caption he chose was a 5-word exercise in catastrophic misjudgment: peace over noise. In his mind, he was likely trying to convey a message of transcendence, of rising above the gossip. But to a public hungry for accountability, it read as profound arrogance and a callous disregard for the emotional wreckage he had caused. The backlash was instantaneous and brutal. The comment section became a torrent of fury. "It's easy to choose peace." One top comment read, "When your noise just destroyed 3 lives." Another user wrote, "Tell that to your wife and your unborn child." He had tried to position himself as the calm at the center of the storm. But instead, he had revealed himself as its oblivious, self-serving creator. Behind the scenes, the machinery of crisis management was in a state of panic. High-priced firms were brought in to staunch the bleeding. Urban's label immediately ceased all press access, and his management team worked frantically to get incriminating YouTube videos and social media posts taken down. But it was like trying to patch a dam with chewing gum. For every one negative story they suppressed, 10 more appeared. The narrative was no longer theirs to control. Nicole's camp, meanwhile, played their hand with quiet precision. An anonymous, family source confirmed to People magazine that she had temporarily moved out of their Nashville home to a private location, for clarity and space. It was another carefully calibrated move, confirming the severity of the rift without descending into a messy public battle. The scandal was no longer just about infidelity, it was about the collapse of a symbol. For nearly 2 decades, Keith and Nicole had represented the aspirational ideal that true love and decency could survive the corrosive pressures of mega fame. Their fall felt personal to the millions who had bought into that myth. It was a betrayal not just of a marriage, but of an idea. And as the world watched, It became clear that even the most golden of love stories could be irrevocably undone by the simple, devastating weight of human weakness. Any lingering shred of doubt, any possibility of this being a sophisticated hoax, was obliterated the moment TMZ entered the fray. Operating with the brutal efficiency of a special forces unit, the infamous outlet published what it claimed were verified hospital records obtained from the private Tennessee clinic. The report confirmed, with chilling and irrefutable precision, the 99.3% paternity result, for the factions of fans still clinging to the hope of Keith's innocence. This was the final, devastating blow. TMZ's involvement elevated the story from a messy rumor to an established fact. In the ecosystem of celebrity news, a TMZ confirmation is the equivalent of a Supreme Court ruling. There is no higher authority, and there is no appeal. The digital dam broke completely. The industry that had tried to maintain a dignified silence was now in open panic. Nashville's most powerful executives, men who controlled the careers of dozens of stars, were huddled in emergency meetings, trying to calculate the financial and reputational fallout. The wholesome, family-friendly brand of country music was facing its most morally compromising moment since the Dixie Chicks were excommunicated for criticizing a president. This was different. This wasn't about politics, it was about a perceived betrayal of the core values, loyalty, faith, and family, that the genre sold to its audience. Then came the screenshots, leaked, allegedly, by a member of Maggie's inner circle who was fed up with the narrative that she was a manipulator. The images depicted a series of purported text exchanges between her and Keith. They were raw, unfiltered, and painted a portrait of a man desperately trying to manage an unmanageable situation. "You know I can't leave my family." One text allegedly from Keith read, "You mean a lot to me. But this can't go public. I'll take care of everything. Just trust me." These messages were, in many ways, more damaging than the DNA test. The paternity result was clinical, scientific proof of a physical act. The texts, however, provided the emotional context. They exposed the alleged manipulation, the broken promises, the frantic attempts to keep a life-altering truth buried. The court of public opinion, which had been divided, now swung decisively in Maggie's favor. The hashtag Believe Maggie began to trend globally on Twitter. Fans who had flooded her comments with insults just days before returned with heartfelt apologies. She was no longer seen as a homewrecker, but as a woman who had been lied to, isolated, and then abandoned by a powerful man trying to protect his image. The turning point was solidified when a journalist reached out to Maggie's former PR representative, who had since parted ways with her. In a stunning move, the ex-representative released a short statement confirming that the formatting and lab codes on the PDF file leaked on Reddit were consistent with the legitimate documents they had received from the clinic. The last pillar of denial had crumbled. This was no longer a scandal. It was, as one entertainment outlet dramatically dubbed it, the music industry's Armageddon, and it was now clear who the sinner was, and who was the victim. After days of strategic silence that had only amplified the crisis, Keith Urban finally broke cover. He appeared, unannounced, on Instagram Live. The setting was stark, a plain wall behind him, the lighting harsh. This was not a polished performance. His hands, gripping his phone, trembled visibly. When he spoke, his voice, usually so smooth and melodic, was hoarse and cracked. "There's a lot of love, a lot of mistakes, and a lot of lessons in life," he began, his eyes darting around, unable to meet the gaze of the camera. "And by extension, the world." He paused, swallowing hard. "Sometimes lines get blurred." He repeated the phrase, as if trying to convince himself of its validity. "Lines get blurred." And then, as abruptly as it began, the stream ended. That short, shaky, 30-second broadcast did more damage to his career than any tabloid headline could have. It was a masterclass in what not to do. It was not an apology. It was not an admission. It was the desperate, rambling confession of a man completely overwhelmed by the consequences of his actions. The phrase, "lines get blurred," became an instant meme, a symbol of his moral equivocation and failure to take clear responsibility. The internet didn't see a man seeking forgiveness. It saw a coward confessing through sheer emotional exhaustion. 24 hours later, Maggie Baugh delivered the coup de grace. Her own Instagram Live was a study in contrasts. A brilliant piece of authentic communication that completely seized control of the narrative. Where Keith had been evasive and shaky, she was direct and emotional. She appeared makeup-free, her face tear-streaked but her eyes resolute. Over 1 million people tuned in to watch her. "This isn't a scandal," she declared, her voice trembling with a potent mix of vulnerability and strength. "This is a life." Then, in a moment of devastating visual power, she held up a black and white ultrasound photo to the camera. "I was promised support," she said, her voice breaking. "I was promised honesty. I got silence." The impact was seismic. She had transformed the narrative from a tawdry celebrity affair into a deeply human story about motherhood, betrayal, and a woman's fight for acknowledgement. The ultrasound photo was her irrefutable evidence, a symbol of life that cut through all the PR spin and legal maneuvering. Authenticity had triumphed over celebrity artifice. Commentators across the political spectrum, from conservative talk show hosts to liberal cultural critics, agreed on one thing: the moral high ground now belonged entirely to Maggie. The public pressure became an unbearable, crushing force. Keith Urban's management, seeing the battle was irretrievably lost, finally issued a formal statement. It was a carefully worded apology, scrubbed clean by lawyers and publicists. "I made mistakes that I deeply regret. I let emotions and circumstances guide me where integrity should have led. I am taking full responsibility for my actions." It was the admission everyone had been waiting for, but it felt hollow. A corporate statement delivered far too late. The fallout was swift and brutal. Nicole Kidman released no statement, but sources confirmed her legal team was preparing to file for divorce. Citing emotional betrayal and irreparable damage, she began attending industry events alone, a silent, powerful symbol of resilience. Maggie, in a move that earned her widespread respect, turned down lucrative offers for tell-all interviews, refusing to monetize her pain. Instead, she quietly filed for official paternity acknowledgement in a Tennessee court, signaling that her goal was recognition, not revenge. Keith Urban, his brand in tatters, vanished from public life completely. His tour dates were postponed indefinitely, and major sponsors quietly invoked the morality clauses in their contracts, terminating their partnerships. In the hushed backrooms of Nashville, the conversation shifted. This was no longer about one man's failings. It was an ethics reckoning for an entire industry built on a carefully polished image of down-home virtue. In the final chapter of the saga, the deafening noise of the scandal finally gave way to a profound and telling silence. The drama no longer played out in headlines and hashtags, but in quiet, human moments captured from a distance. TMZ, the outlet that had delivered the final evidentiary blow, now provided the first glimpse of penance. They released grainy, long-lens footage of Keith Urban, alone, arriving at a private hospital in Nashville. His face was drawn and looked years older, stripped of all its rockstar glamour. He clutched a large, pink gift bag, a simple, almost heartbreakingly normal gesture in the midst of an extraordinary downfall. Days later, the world heard from Maggie. She posted a single, artistic black and white photo on her Instagram. It showed a newborn's hand, tiny and perfect, wrapped around an adult finger. There was no caption, no explanation. The image spoke for itself, a universal symbol of new life and motherhood. The comment section overflowed with congratulations and support. And then, a single anonymous comment appeared, a comment that was screenshotted and shared millions of times within minutes. "I'll always be here. K." That single initial, appended to a simple promise, was the final, ambiguous coda to the public drama. It reignited every debate and every emotion. But it also, for many, provided a sense of closure. It was not forgiveness, nor was it a solution. But it was an acknowledgement, a quiet admission that beneath the layers of fame, failure, and public humiliation, there was a human connection that now had to be navigated away from the cameras. Public opinion, in its final evolution, shifted from anger toward a more complex, weary understanding. The viral phrase that ultimately encapsulated the world's verdict was not one of condemnation for Maggie or even just for Keith. It was a simple, profound statement of cause and effect. Maggie didn't ruin Keith. Keith ruined Keith. It was an acknowledgement of personal responsibility. A recognition that the architect of his own destruction was the man himself. In the end, the scandal became more than a tabloid story. It became a mirror reflecting the fragile intersection of power, love, and consequence in the modern age. It served as a potent reminder to millions that the shield of celebrity is a fragile one. And that in an era of total exposure, the truth is not something you can manage, it is something that will eventually manage you. For Nicole, silence became her ultimate strength, allowing her to emerge with her dignity not only intact, but enhanced. For Maggie, motherhood became her redemption, transforming her from a scandal figure into a symbol of resilience. And for Keith, the music finally stopped. The roar of the crowd was replaced by the deafening echo of a single, irreversible choice. And for Nashville, the city of songs and secrets, the melody had changed forever. The ballads of love and loyalty now carried a new, cautionary refrain. Even legends can fall. And when they do, the whole world is watching.